guys, the Comics Kid 2099 here to talk to you about a short horror novel. This is 13 short horror novels. There are a whole bunch of stories in here, but I am only talking to you about one of them, called Nightfliers, written by George R.R. Martin. This omnibus was released, I believe, in 1987. There is a foreword dated 1987. The short story Nightfliers was first written in 1980 and then later expanded in 1981. And I believe what is collected in this book is from 1980. There is an audiobook on YouTube that is also Nightfliers, but it has stuff that is not in this version of the story. So if you find the audiobook on YouTube, I think that is the expanded version of the story from 1981. And I believe this is the original shorter version from 1980. If you are interested in getting this book, there are some other authors you've heard of before. You have Stephen King, Arthur Conan Doyle, George R.R. Martin, Fritz Leiber, Ray Bradbury, and H.P. Lovecraft. And there's some other names on here that I did not recognize. But this story is pretty good. It's basically a haunted house story set in a spaceship. And I am finding that I am really enjoying looking into George R.R. Martin's short stories that are not necessarily part of the A Song of Ice and Fire world. I really do enjoy his A Song of Ice and Fire books. I love seeing someone who I would consider is a master of his craft just going hundreds of pages into this world that he has clearly thought a lot about. He has definitely put a lot of care into his craft and into building this world that a lot of people really enjoy. And I definitely am one of those who really enjoy it. But I also like seeing him put that same level of care and craft into some of these short stories. And I found out looking into this that Nightfliers is actually part of what he calls the Thousand Worlds universe, where it's set many, maybe thousands of years in the future after mankind has gone out and colonized other worlds, and then there was some kind of civil war, and these stories are set in the chaos following this universal battle. And you don't really get a whole lot of that backstory in this book. You do get some backstory. They mention aliens and stuff like that that don't necessarily play a part in this story, but finding out that this is part of something bigger made me want to go and read some of these other short stories. And I feel like if, God forbid, if something happened to George R.R. Martin and he was not able to finish The Winds of Winter or the A Song of Ice and Fire series in general, that we could go back and look at some of his pre-Game of Thrones work and appreciate what he wrote there. There's still a lot of really cool stories that George R.R. Martin has written that we should look into and appreciate for what they are. There's not a whole lot that I have to say about this story. Like I said, it is basically a haunted house story in space. There's this group of scientists. They have chartered a ship because there is this ship, or possibly a fleet of ships, that has been going at sub-light speed for possibly millions of years, going across the universe, and this one scientist, he wants to see this fleet for himself. For a long time, this fleet was considered to be legendary. People weren't even sure if it existed. Now this one particular scientist, he believes, yes, it does exist, and I want to see it. It's very kind of sort of like Ahab going after the whale at the risk of his own life and everyone in his crew. There's definitely a little bit of that there. It's a little different. It's not exactly like Ahab and Moby Dick, but there's some really interesting, what I would say, just very basic screenwriting 101, where you set up some kind of conflict, and then you make people think, okay, this is what the conflict is, and then you pull the rug out from under them. No, just kidding, this is what it is. And I won't spoil what that is, but I was fooled for most of this story. I would say it was just a page or two before the actual reveal of what was going on here was where I started to figure out, wait a minute, this might be what's going on. And that was, I'm not saying that I'm smart or anything. If I was really smart, I would have figured it out much earlier. But this is really interesting. I found myself really engaged by this story, and by the end, I was sad to see it end, and I wanted to see more of these characters and of this world. There was a movie in the 80s. I know very little about the movie, but apparently it does change a good deal from this story. And then there was also a TV series on the Sci-Fi Channel, and I believe on Netflix as well, depending on where you live, if you're in America or not. I know even less about the TV series, but reading this book, I am interested in seeing those adaptations and see if they are able to measure up to this story. Like I said, not a whole lot to talk about here. I really enjoyed this story. I don't want to spoil it too much. I am interested in reading the expanded version and seeing just how different is that from this version. How much longer is it? Is it a good deal longer? There are several characters in this book who Martin doesn't even bother giving them names. He doesn't really go into descriptions about them. For example, there are two characters here who are linguists, and they're husband and wife, and that's all we know about them. We don't know their names. We don't know what they look like. We don't really know anything about them. We are told that they argue with each other in their private time, but we don't know much about them, and that's true for most of the characters in this. There are a couple of characters that we get into and we kind of get to know very well, and it is their story, and so these other characters, these minor characters, they're not really important, and it's almost like the story is saying, don't worry about them. The xenobiologist, all you need to know is this is another character on the ship. And I'm curious if the expanded version expands their roles, gives them names and descriptions and stuff like that. I am curious about that, because by the time you get to A Song of Ice and Fire, even minor characters, very minor characters, have names, and you feel like they have histories and they have roles to play even if you don't know what they are, or even if the role that they have to play is not going to be very important in the story that you're reading right now. And so I'm wondering if that's something that Martin wasn't entirely thrilled with how he left it in the first draft, and then he went and kind of revised that later on. I don't know. But this book here, if you do happen to find it, it is kind of interesting, because now everyone knows the name of George R.R. Martin, but back then it was almost like here is like 5 writers that you've heard of, and then here's another 8 that you probably haven't heard of before, and George R.R. Martin was one of those, because 1987, I want to say that's almost 10 years before the first A Song of Ice and Fire book came out. I think it was like mid-90s when A Game of Thrones came out, and in this book his name is on the cover, but then you open up the dust jacket and it starts describing some of the stories within, and then it says Baker's Dozen. That actually might be this one, even though it doesn't say Baker's Dozen. Wait, yeah, it does. So it says that's not one of the stories, sorry, but it talks about Jerusalem's Lot, written by Stephen King, not to be confused with Salem's Lot, which is a very similar name. And then over on the other side, you have Sardonicus, you have Body, you have Children of the Kingdom, The Stains. It talks about some of these stories like it's trying to lure you in and say, hey, Sardonicus, look at this. And it's kind of interesting from a historical point of view when you look at this, and it's like they didn't mention George R.R. Martin at all on here. And if this had come out just 10 years later, they would have thrown his name in huge letters on the cover and said, this is a story written by the guy who brought to you the Game of Thrones world. And so it's kind of interesting from a historical point of view. But I enjoyed this, and I definitely want to delve more into Martin's 1000 Worlds universe. So that's about all that I have to say here. Not strictly speaking horror. There are definitely some horror aspects of this story. Like I said, this is a horror story set in outer space, so still horror, but not as horror as you might expect. But anyway, that's about all that I have to say about the Nightfliers. I hope you guys like this review, and I will talk to you guys in the future. In the meantime, have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.